I don't remember the first time I saw the ocean. It has always been there, breathing, pulling, taking. But I remember the first time I saw a ship big enough to steal the horizon. They came on a morning that tasted wrong, too still. Even the gulls circled without shouting, as if they were trying not to wake something. My name is Wâpanâkwe. It is not the name they will write down. It is the name my mother spoke when she lifted me from the river and said, "Live." I am old now, old enough that my knees predict rain better than the sky. Old enough to have watched children become grandparents. Old enough to know this: the land forgets nothing, and it forgives slowly. We had already met men from across the water, traders, strangers with hard smiles and softer promises. They came and left like storms. But this was different. This time, the sea did not bring a handful of men. It brought a hungry village packed into wood. From the ridge, I watched the floating houses drift closer. Their sides were scarred, like animals that had fought the ocean and barely won. They moved awkwardly, like they were not meant to be here. Someone beside me whispered a word I didn't like. A word for bad medicine. A word for change that doesn't ask permission. Down on the beach, our hunters stood still. Not afraid, not brave, just listening. Because you can learn a great deal about a stranger by how they arrive. When the small boats finally scraped the shore, the people who climbed out didn't look like conquerors. They looked like winter. Thin, stiff in their strange skins. Their faces pale like they had been kept away from the sun. Some of them moved with the careful steps of the sick. One man fell to his knees in the sand and pressed his forehead to the ground. He began speaking to the sky. At first I thought he was thanking the land. Then I realized he was thanking something else. Something far away. I felt a small, bitter laugh in my chest. Not because he was foolish, because I understood what he was doing. When people are desperate, they speak to whatever they can imagine listening. They carried objects that made no sense here. Heavy boxes, metal that glinted like frozen water, cloth that would drink rain until it became a stone. They looked at the forest the way a starving man looks at a sealed pot. Not with wonder, with calculation. A woman stepped down from one of the boats. She held a bundle tight against her chest, as if the wind might steal it. Her eyes were sharp, darting from tree line to shore, shore to sky. She wasn't admiring anything. She was measuring it. I saw her lips move as if counting. How many trees? How much distance? How much space between her and the next breath of danger? For a moment, I almost liked her. Not as a friend, as a mirror. Because I recognized the look. I had worn it myself in the years when sickness came. That sickness did not arrive with lightning or the roar of war. It came quietly. First as a cough that wouldn't leave. Then as fevers that burned through families like fire through dry grass. Then as silence in the places where children used to play. Some winters, we buried so many that the ground seemed tired of receiving them. And now, watching the newcomers sway on the sand, I wondered what else had traveled with them inside those wooden bellies. Our young ones wanted to walk closer, to wave, to show we were not afraid. And maybe we weren't, but I lifted my hand and they stopped. Because fear is not the only reason you keep your distance. Sometimes you keep your distance because you can feel the shape of something before it arrives. The strangers looked up at our ridge and finally saw us. Their faces changed. Relief. Then something else. A man raised his arm, palm outward, the gesture of peace. Or the gesture of ownership. I've seen both use the same hand. Behind him, another man stared at the trees and smiled. Not kindly, hungrily. I turned my head slightly to my grandson and spoke softly, so only he could hear. "Do you see how they look at the land?" I asked. He squinted. "They look at it like they want to live," he said. I watched the boats, the bundles, the boxes. The way they kept stepping forward, as if the ground owed them space. "No," I said. "They look at it like it belongs to them already." The wind shifted then, lifting the smell of salt and wet wood. And under it, another smell. Smoke from their ship, old sweat, rotting food, sickness. The sea had brought them to our shore, yes, but the sea had not brought them empty-handed. One of our men began walking down the ridge, slowly, hands open. A greeting, a question. The woman on the beach tightened her hold on the bundle. Her eyes flicked toward the forest again, as if she feared what lived there. As if she didn't understand the forest was not the danger. The danger was the hunger that had followed her across the water. I stayed on the ridge until the sun climbed higher, until the newcomers began to talk louder, to point, to step further up the sand. They thought they had reached the edge of the world, a clean beginning, a fresh page. I watched them and felt something settle in my bones, heavy, familiar. The feeling you get when you see storm clouds on a day that started bright. Because I knew something they did not. There are arrivals that end with a farewell, and there are arrivals that end with more arrivals. I turned away from the sea, and in my mind I spoke to the land like an old friend. Be patient, I thought. Be cruel if you must. Because we were about to learn what these people really meant when they said the word survive.